Hello and welcome to this edition of Velocity Kinetics, where we're just going to conduct. I have no idea what word I was shooting for there. We're going to look into a season review of Formula 1 2019. So this is probably going to be like last year's, where it's going to be done in bits. We're going to try and keep it very short though, because obviously 2020 F1 season's not actually that far away from starting. So let's get into it, shall we? Why didn't I do it at the end of last year? Because I got busy with work, overtime, other videos. The amount of content we got to pump out at the end of the last year was unbelievable, at least compared to the other years. But anyway, so F1 2019, it was a very good year. Unfortunately, dominated by Mercedes again. Now, there isn't an awful lot you can say or do about what happened with Mercedes. Ultimately they had the best car. As much as I don't like them, as in for how dominating they are, as much as I might not like them very much anymore, ultimately they had the best car. They put it to the best use. What the bloody hell else were they going to do? So from testing, we had Ferrari looking like they were going to dominate, and Mercedes suddenly looked on the back foot. Ferrari they had an unbelievably good testing and then flopped in the first race. Now, why did they flop? The reason why they flopped is because they had no problems during testing. Now, if they had some problems, they'd have obviously had to got their arse in gear and get some of it fixed. But because they didn't, they didn't know that they needed things to fix, which is possibly some of the problems when it comes to a perfect test. Whereas Mercedes had built a dog of a car, realised the problem, got it fixed, and then suddenly it was up and running. Red Bull were quite impressive with that Honda switch from having had a Renault and having had the car at least initially designed to take a Renault engine. But nonetheless, they did very well. It had a lot of impressive drives throughout the season, but we come to a team that Russ and I are getting more and more disappointed with and less happy with. Williams, turning up late to testing with insufficient parts and an illegal car. I'm sorry, that's just not on. Now, I quite like Robert Kubica, and I feel his comeback was hindered by the Williams, but it was an awful test. They did next to no recovery. The livery was not very good. It looked half finished. And, so as the season went on, we looked like we had Bottas 2.0. Now, Bottas has upped his game massively. Now, I don't dispute that he didn't have a very good season the year before, but I think masses of team orders had to do with it. So I've just got a new webcam and it's auto-focusing all the time, so apologies if it does it in the video. And I apologise if there's a little thing burned onto the corner. I've not had a chance to test this yet, so we'll see what it does. But anyway, Bottas was very impressive. He did very well. Some people would say, well, he should have done better. But at the same time, you're up against Lewis Hamilton, a team that the team used to have two number ones, have realised it's not a good idea to have two number ones and gone for a clear number one, number two. So anyone in the seat that isn't Lewis Hamilton is naturally not going to have as good an opportunity. Doesn't matter who you stick. Perez, Kubica, Ocon, Vettel, they are not going to have the same chance as Hamilton. I'm going to say Hamilton so much I'm going to sound like Pride from NCIS. Hamilton. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Get the point I'm saying. It's not necessarily Bottas's fault, but anyone in the second seat in the Mercedes really doesn't stand much of a shout at going very far. So he was second in the championship and mathematically could have won it for so long. I appreciate he might have had a mid-season dip in form, but actually, he did kind of well the whole way through, especially to stay mathematically in contention for as long as he did with the performance drought that he suffered. Don't forget as well, during this year, poor Valtteri, he went through a marriage breakup, which is a shame because I thought, at least on Instagram and things, I thought they were very happy, but maybe it's the cost of driving for Mercedes. maybe it's costing him the best bits of himself. You had the rise of Max Verstappen even further with the Honda power. You had Honda doing an unbelievably good job. I thought they were going to spend a lot of the season blowing up, and I thought we were going to see a lot of the season with Red Bull throwing them under the bus. I still think they will, as in Red Bull throw Honda under the bus at some point, but they've done very well. You had the weird thing where Gasly was demoted and Albon was promoted. You've had all sorts of things going on throughout the season. And don't forget, we've got also for Valtteri, you had Ocon being a threat to his seat for so long that would have affected him no end. And then at Renault, you've obviously got the drivers change. You've got Force India doing an okay-ish job. You've got Lance Stroll sort of you got Alpha doing a hit and miss job, very good, very bad some days. You got Raikkonen still continuing to improve. Like I said, you had Kubica pretty much propping up the grid, unfortunately. Toro Rosso, what a year! Wow. I'm not going to go through this race by race because I haven't got, unfortunately, because I've got other stuff to get done, and including an interview to prep for. Still, I'm just doing this as a quick break. You've still got a pretty good season. Now, I appreciate that some people said the rule changes didn't work here, but for me, just from the design phase, you had a good mixture of designs. You had people doing the cutaway front wing. You had Alpha's very extreme solution. You had people using the maximum allowed elements on the front wing. You had people changing the barge boards, adding capes under the nose to try and get downforce under the car. There's so many different approaches. Even when it came to trying to generate the outwash, some people eventually copied Williams' cutout on the side of the wing. It's pretty much the only real thing Williams brought to the table. Aside from some very cool looking wing mirrors that were suddenly deemed illegal, which is crap. Anyway, you've got all these. You had quite a few different takes on the season. For design, liveries were a bit hit and miss. Taurus's looked pretty good. The Williams had a chance to be fantastic, and it didn't. We'll go through this ranking it team by team. I'm not gonna give them a grade or a number because, well, one, we're a bit late to the party, and two, that's done to death. As in, I can't offer a new take on it. So we'll start with the championship winners. We'll start with Mercedes. Hamilton won again. He might be statistically the best driver on the planet, but that's it to me. And the thing for me that I will always find hard. I don't get me wrong. I liked Hamilton when he left McLaren because I thought it was going to be at McLaren forever. I liked Hamilton when he went from McLaren to Mercedes. So if Hamilton changed team, I'd probably build some more respect for him. Problem is, he's not been in a car that's really struggled. The 2009 McLaren might have been the worst car he's had to drive, and even then by the end of the season it was a race winner, so he's not had to drive a bad car for very long, hence why I'm always a bit towards him. Most drivers come in and do their time in a crap car first, even just as a test driver, and he didn't. So, he got a lot of accolades and a lot of things very quickly for stuff that in some ways he doesn't. It's wrong to say he doesn't deserve, but others deserve it more, if that makes sense. But anyway, he's now a 6-time champion. He's going on to break some of Schumi's records. We've got Bottas having done a good job. Mercedes won. That's about all they can do. And I need to stop this there because I got a phone call. And we are back very briefly. So we covered Mercedes. Ferrari, a less than impressive season. They went with the low drag concept. Just took them a long time to suss it out. As we mentioned in the intro, because they didn't have any problems in testing, they didn't know how badly the car wasn't working until they got to Australia. So you can't really have a go at Ferrari too much about it. But a team like Ferrari should have been able to turn it around quicker. They should not have made the strategy screw-ups that they did along the way. But they did, so there's not a lot else we can really do about that. Not Gasly, because I'm saying Gasly because I just saw a picture of him on Facebook. Leclerc has been very impressive in his debut Ferrari season. Vettel has been less than impressive. To be honest, he's got all the hallmarks of someone who might be going out the door sometime soon. Voluntarily or not, I'm not sure, but I can't see Ferrari keeping him unless he somehow sets the world on fire this season. Red Bull, the Honda partnership has worked very well. The car seems to do things in places it's just unimaginable, especially at the top speeds they've been able to achieve with the Honda power when previously they've been so down on straight line speed. I mean, just to talk about Honda, Gasly out-dragged Hamilton to the finish line in Brazil. No one, last year if someone said that about Honda, you might have you'd have been sceptical, but you wouldn't have properly believed it. The Albon-Gasly switch, they didn't give Gasly enough time. The team's too focused around Verstappen. Similar case to Mercedes, unless the number 2 driver starts setting the world on fire, they're not really going to get an awful lot of attention. I think they should have signed Hülkenberg rather than promote from within, because look at what happened with Kvyat. He'd barely been in F1 20 minutes and they pulled him up to the Red Bull, and then he got demoted. Look at what happened with Gasly. Barely been in F1 20 minutes, pulled up to the Red Bull, and demoted. I mean, Albon seems to be holding his own, but who knows what next season will hold for him. McLaren, a very impressive year. Probably the best year of any team. McLaren-Renault is actually a brilliant combination. Doesn't roll off the tongue very nicely, but McLaren-Renault, very good combination. Very impressive. I didn't initially like Lando, but actually he's a breath of fresh air. Carlos seems to have settled down beautifully. Got a podium, granted after the race, but they got a podium the first time in years. The team seems to be on the up, and if they can keep this upward trajectory, I see race wins in their future next season. They've been so good, but when we're talking about McRenault, we have to then take the muck off and go to Renault. Oh dear. Not a very good year for them. They've done a bad thing getting rid of Hülkenberg. They need experience. They've signed Ocon, which I guess French with French, that might be the reason why. But Renault have been doing a lot of restructuring. I think they're trying to capture some of the years they had when they were Lotus, particularly 22. Ricciardo took a lot longer than I thought he would to settle into the Renault. To be honest, he just didn't want to be in the Red Bull family anymore. He wanted his own freedom to do what he wants, so I understand why he went to Renault, but this year has not really panned out very well for him on that front. Where do they go next year? I mean, they dropped the ball. They were in fourth place last year, looking like they were knocking on the door of third place. Hülkenberg had the opportunity to take a couple of podiums this year. He didn't. Renault were caught using a automatic brake bias adjuster, which cost them a podium. Cost Danny Rick a podium. The engine's been a bit hit and miss. It seems to be working better in the back of the McLaren, but I think it's because McLaren's got a chassis that flatters it. So I said we would be back, and it's another day, another shirt, and we're continuing on where we left off with the review of 2019. So we got through Mercedes, we got through Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and Renault. So next up, we're on to Force India, the Pink Panthers, Sport Pacer Racing Point Formula 1 team is what they're called now, and I'm just going to call them the Pink Panthers because I can't be bothered with that. Not a very good year for them. Lance Stroll hasn't really performed as well as he could have done. Daddy Stroll bought the team, got them out of financial difficulty. Rumour is they might be coming back as Aston Martin, so we might see the pink dot disappear and don a nice shade of British racing green with the Aston Martin wings. Well, I would have thought Red Bull would have been the one for that, but then again, Aston have ties with Mercedes, and so, at least in the current generation of Astons, are using Mercedes engines rather than Honda. So it makes more sense to tie up Force India as Aston Martin than Red Bull, even though Red Bull would probably prefer the Aston Martin name, given that's what flies on the rear wing of the car. Unless it becomes like Lagonda or something like that, but still. Sergio Perez has done a very good job. He continues to go forwards. He's got a good, solid reputation in the midfield, but I think he's now firmly cemented in the midfield trap. I doubt, aside from maybe the Ferrari seat that might be up for grabs next year, I doubt he's going anywhere, which in some ways is a shame, but at the same time, if other teams wanted him, he would have made himself available if Ferrari or Mercedes or a top McLaren or Red Bull had come knocking. He wouldn't have just ignored that. Stroll, like I said, he's not set the world on fire, but there's not an awful lot really you can say about the team. They've shown promise, and I hope they can continue to deliver a good car on a small budget. But this year has not been their finest hour. But that said, McLaren's resurgence and Renault's falling back has sort of shadowed what Force India have been able to achieve. Because don't forget, a couple of years ago they got a podium in a car that should really have not been anywhere near the podium. So things are a bit hit and miss with that team. They've at least got the funding to keep going, which is the most important thing. Next up, Scuderia Toro Rosso. What a year. I wish I'd put a bet on at the start of the season to say they'd get a podium or two. The odds were fantastic. I was very tempted to put only a daft bet as like 20... No, it's the odds. I was only going to put maybe a 5 on a max, but I'm sure the odds were like 40, 50 to 1 for them to get a podium, given the closer time with Red Bull. And I wish I had, because that would have been a nice return for me. Kvyat settling in nicely, backing in the Honda-powered Toro Rosso. We're going to be AlphaTauri this coming year. He's done very well, scored plenty of points, put in some fantastic performances. The Honda hasn't quite been as strong as it could have been. I think they used one more engine than they were supposed to be allowed to use. But still, given where they were on other seasons where they were blowing up 3-4 times a weekend, I think they did very well this year. Then you got the weird situation of Albon being in and then being switched out with Gasly. Now, Gasly got a sterling second place in Brazil, and thoroughly deserved. That Honda in the back of the Toro Rosso out-dragged Hamilton to the line, as we covered, I think, in the Red Bull section of the video. So it's all very good at Toro Rosso. Now they just need to keep going with how they're building the car. They need to keep that technical time with sister team Red Bull. The only problem is you've got Dietrich Mateschitz and Helmut Marko sort of threatening to pull the plug on Red Bull all the time, which in turn would take out Toro Rosso. Now Toro Rosso will exist on the grid for years. They've existed as Minardi 4 years. Now, given those of us who have watched F1 for years and seen Minardi Cosworth at the back, or just Minardi, depending on what they're powered by, but mostly Cosworth powered, for a team that usually didn't get a point in a season, maybe 1, 2, to then have 2 podiums, that counts as so basically they've now stood as Toro Rosso. They've stood on every step of the podium. They won with Vettel. They stood as third with Kvyat. They were close to winning again, but sterling performance. And then they got second with Gasly. I hope they can continue to perform well. They seem to work very well with Honda, and Honda benefited massively from working with Toro Rosso to begin with. Moving on from Toro Rosso, we've got Alfa Romeo. Now, Raikkonen was an okay... Well, it's wrong to say it's an okay signing. It's a good signing for that team. It's very good for him. It's good to see someone his age can still cut it in F1. Given that he's outlasted Alonso, he's outlasted Vettel, he's probably going to outlast Barrichello. I think someone said if Kimi decides to see out the whole season, then he'll have more races under his belt than the great Rubinho, which says a lot, really, doesn't it? Giovinazzi hasn't been the greatest of teammates this year. However, this is really his first proper foray in a rookie season in an average car. They had Alpha had a brilliant concept front wing, and that's what I loved about these rules. Some people are saying the rules this season didn't work. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't care. It brought innovation, and Alpha had that extreme solution on the front for the front wheel outwash, and it was very, very good. The car looked stunning, as it always does, in that red and white. Could have performed better. Raikkonen reckons they probably could have got a second or third. I don't doubt with him at the wheel they probably could have done. Rumour is Alpha might be on the way out at the end of this coming season, as in Alfa Romeo don't want to race, which I think is a shame, especially for something from the Ferrari stable. So it might go back to Sauber or God knows what, maybe even a Honda Works team maybe. I think Ferrari will keep that team going in some ways, so they might bring out Maserati or another team from the Ferrari stable, or manufacturer even from the Ferrari stable, because Ferrari needs a feeder team, and it doesn't really have one. As for next year for Alpha, I would, in all probability, say it's Kimi's last year in Formula One. They've got Robert Kubica signed up as test and reserve driver. They've got PKN Orlen as a new sponsor, which will bring some much-needed funding to the team. Ferrari will help them where they can, but Ferrari's got its own team to run. Giovinazzi has been confirmed for another year. Hulkenberg was potentially going to be confirmed there before not being confirmed anywhere. The future looks interesting for them, and we'll see how it goes. Haas next. There were Rich Energy Haas. What a fucking debacle that was at the start of the year. Oh, good God. Now, at least Rich Energy fucked off out of Formula One like it needed to. Well, I won't. Maybe I'm being quite harsh saying it. They had to fuck off out of Formula One, but they had an air of arrogance that just didn't befell the team very well. It was a horrible, horrible approach, and then criticism's been lobbed here and there at the team and so on and so forth. I just don't know. I just don't know what the best thing is to say about it. I just know that Haas are better off without them. The car itself has been a bit of a dog. It's not anything that Haas have had an awful lot of control over. Well, in the sense of until they get the car on the track, they don't know how well it's going to perform. They haven't really got on top of the tyres. They had an opportunity to get rid of Romain or K-Mag. I understand why Haas kept K-Mag and Grosjean. The reason why they've kept those two is for consistency. So if next year's car's a dog, or this year's car's a dog, should I say, sorry, if 2020 is a dog, then they've got comparable data, whereas they haven't got a waste a year. As well, I say waste because it is a waste a year in many ways, getting someone like Hulkenberg settled in. But I do think the Hulk would have been a better choice than Romain. Don't get me wrong, I like that Romain drives with his heart on his sleeve, but the number of memes that have been out there about him potentially becoming Pastor Maldonado, and he's only a few crashes away from becoming Maldonado and things like that, it's not good. Haas did run a very nice black and gold livery. This year I imagine they're going back to their normal colours. Now what's concerning is Haas, I've said they now have to consider their future, and Gunther Steiner said Gene Haas has to be the one who considers it, which is surprising given that they said they were going to be in F1 for at least 10 years when they started the project. But then when you think about it, we're at 2020, they're nearly halfway through that period that they said they were going to potentially stay in F1 for. So actually, it's not like they've done a HRT or a Marussia or a Caterham or a Lola or any other small team, ATS, for instance, or HKS, Penske, you name it, or the original Haas team. It's like it's not like they've came and gone. They've come and stayed and done relatively well, but gone back. Haas needs to get a grip next year. Some of their qualifying performances have been fan-bloody-tastic, and they've gone and fucked it up in the race. Russ is not very big on Haas. Now, it's something to do with Gene Haas being a tax avoidant, a bit of a criminal, so I won't babble on too much longer about Haas, but I hope they can improve. They need to show that new teams can come in and stay, and they've also obviously found a new way in for teams, so I hope they can make the proof. And finally, Williams. As I said at the beginning of the video, they fucking turned up late with an illegal car, more suspension elements than it's allowed, claiming one of them was a cable shroud. Some decent-looking wing mirrors that were later deemed illegal. Paddy fucking Lowe, who gave birth to the brilliant of the Williams with the active suspensions, like the FW14B and its predecessor, and FW15C as well, I think, as well. To fuck up to such a degree that the livery on the Williams was awful. I think, right, I love Williams. I love an underdog. I think they are a brilliant team. They should be on the grid forever. But Claire Williams just isn't doing the name any favours. And why I say Claire Williams rather than Frank is because Claire does a lot of the day-to-day running. The buck stops with her. Ultimately, I think Frank has the final say. But a lot of things running up to it go through Claire. And I think she might need to step back into a non-executive role, like a chairperson role, and maybe give John Williams a try from the Heritage Division, her brother. The livery was disgusting on the car. Well, maybe disgusting is a bit extreme, but it wasn't very nice. You've got them delivering Kubic's specially adapted steering wheel 4 races from the end. Now, I appreciate the car was that bad. I don't think even with that, Kubica could have done much better than he did. But it's the principle that they didn't bring it. Russell did okay in Hungary. That was about as good of a qualifying performance they got. Williams got their 1 point on the technicality, but every year it feels like we're saying, next year, Williams, next year, Spirit of the Blitz and all that. Pip, pip, cheerio, a cup of tea, scones, crumpets. Oh, I'm English. Kind of thing. Oh, man. So, I'm not despondent. Well, I'm somewhere on the way to despondent. I'm not apoplectic, but I'm not despondent. I think, like a lot of people, I'm running out of patience with them. They seem to get the design wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and they can't seem to improve. They seem to borrow a David Coulthard phrase, past performance is no guarantee of future success. Just because Mercedes won this year does not mean they won last year, that they will win this year. Just because Williams were at the bottom of the grid last year doesn't mean they'll suddenly rise to be at the top. Just because Williams is still, at the moment, I think, in terms of championships, the most successful English Formula One team, does not mean that they will win anymore. They've already sold the advanced engineering division, or at least taken a partial buyout on the shares on it to focus on the Formula One team. How bloody dire does the situation have to get for that to happen? I can't fathom it. I can't plumb the depths of the English vocabulary to sum up the words that I need to describe this, because it's awful. It's beyond awful. And if Williams find this video, chances are they may not, unless someone feels kind enough to point it out to them. It's like, as a long-term Williams fan, as a person who has a Williams Martini racing badge on my lanyard at work, granted the badge is uniform to pieces, and the fact you're selling Martini gear is not very reassuring. But for God's sake, learn. If I didn't learn in my job, I'd be out the bloody door. If I made the same mistakes, my manager, as much as we get on, my manager would be forced to get rid of me. Much like any other person in any job, no matter how well you get on with your manager or whether you're related or not, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then you'll be out the door. The team is at risk of going under more than ever, even more when Frank ran it on a shoestring in some ways. Because even in those shoestring days, you get a cheap Cosworth Ford DFV8 and a good gearbox to go with it. So all you had to worry about was putting a shell on the damn thing. Now you can't do that. You've got to buy your engine at exorbitant cost. And at the moment, with what they're doing, Mercedes could very rightly at the end of this year go, we might have a contract, but we're not going to honour it. You need to find someone else. And I can't see Williams tying in with Ferrari. Renault might be thankful for the business because McLaren are going back to Mercedes power. And Honda, I don't think, want to supply more than two teams. So Williams might suddenly find themselves without an engine for their motor, for their vehicle. Jesus Christ. Anyway, overall the season it wasn't bad, not a classic. Very good compared to some recent years. This is the season as a whole. I appreciate I've just had a massive rant about Williams and gone on about something else. But anyway, the season was what it was. Very good. Could have been better, but we're not going to complain too much. As for 2020, we're going to probably see record levels of spending because it's the final year before the budget cap comes into place. The budget cap's still too high, but still it's the final year before budget caps. And then after that, what else have we got? We've got the final year before we go into the massive new technical regs. People saying that they're not going to be as fast as the GP2 car, which in 2021, which I don't think is the case. But record levels of spending, I think if there's ever going to be a push to topple the mighty Mercedes, this is the year it will happen. This is the year I think we've got to more seriously than other years, because I don't think Verstappen had the maturity to deal with it. We have more seriously got a Mercedes challenger in the form of Hamilton. You can never write Valtteri Bottas off, because the number of times he's pulled performances when when people thought he wouldn't. You can't write Valtteri off. You can't write Hamilton in or off, because he's had such an impressive few years. He might be burnt out. You've then got Ferrari, and they'll probably throw everything behind Leclerc. You might get Vettel coming in, but that'd be about it. Renault might have been very busy in Enstone and might pull something special. McLaren, given the rate of improvement they have had, they improve as much again, then they could be a serious threat. Maybe for a cheeky win, maybe nothing more than that, but nonetheless, they're suddenly going to be back as a fighting force. Mathematically, and looking at the odds, Williams can also do that, but realistically, I don't think so. The midfield, we're still going to nearly have Formula 1 and Formula 1.5. I think that'll probably be led, but I think the top 3 is going to turn to the top 4. So we're going to have McLaren joining the fight at the front. The midfield, I think you're going to probably see Danny Rick and Kimi Räikkönen leading it. That's if Renault and Alfa can get the designs right. Williams might be able to mix it up for 1 or 2 more points, but until I actually see the car on track and they're actually pushing it, I'm sorry, but I have to say I think they're going to be propping up the grid again. Haas, if they can get it right, given how quick the car proved to be quite a few times, they could occasionally fight at the front of the midfield, but they won't do it regularly. And as for things like Toro Rosso, I hope they maintain their upwards trajectory. I can't really say where they're going to be, because there have been years where Toro Rosso have looked like they've finally got their arse in gear, and then there have been years where it's just not quite worked, not necessarily through them not getting it right, just for the car finding itself in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's the end of this giant ramble. I hope you enjoyed this this review. Got a couple more videos coming shortly. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe to the page. Please continue to donate via paypal.me/Velocity Kinetics. And we will see you soon. Please drive safe.